This is Eyes on the Asphalt, a surrealist autofiction podcast written and produced by me, Redsmith Sweetser. You can find Eyes on the Asphalt on Twitter and Instagram at EyesOTAsphalt, as well as support it on Patreon. This episode is Wrong Side of the River and explores how a wrong turn at the wrong time can reignite fears long since forgotten. I grew up on the Ohio River, and it was not blue, and it was not beautiful. It was brown, and it was slow, a lackluster tributary to the Mississippi. Every time we crossed over it and into Kentucky, across a bridge the color of the sky, I held my breath in self-imposed superstition. If I had known more about fish, it would have been like a preemptive swim bladder. If I had known more about physics, I would have rolled up the windows instead. But I was young, so I feared something much worse than death by drowning or surface tension. I knew that so much water in such a small space was much more dangerous than a bare expanse of silt and corn and soybeans. I knew that rivers had presence, something like a grove of trees downed in the same direction, or a gap between two rock faces, a space just wide enough for something to slip into, or for something to slip out of. I knew that if I wasn't careful, and if I stopped paying attention, and I forgot where I was and how I had gotten there, I wouldn't be able to find my way back, and even if I did, it would not be the same as I had left it. So, I held my breath, and reminded myself of home every time we crossed over those wide waters. Rivers in the far extremities of watersheds were by far the most ethereal fears I had as a child. The rest were far more standard. Our unfinished basement, for one. The mere prospect of the continental shelf, for another. I was embarrassed about being afraid of the dark, so, to prove a point, I would make myself stay in the long, shadowed hallway upstairs for as long as I could bear it, standing with my hands balled into tight fists, teeth digging into my cheeks, eyes wide against the yawning blackness, until I convinced myself I saw a shape move up the stairs and leapt into my bed, pulling the covers over my head in the lapse of logic. The thing about fears is that they never really go away. Not really. At least, not the ones from childhood. Our gut feelings are right. They were resolved over the steady course of evolution, sowing instinct into our perception. The source of these fears is never removed, after all. Eyes still can't see without the light, and we still know that we can drown in a cup of water, but they do become overshadowed by the horror of growing up. I don't remember the day I stopped being afraid of the dark. I don't remember the day I stopped fearing the crossing of bridges. These fears were just left behind as I learned more of our world, or they were simply forgotten. The place I live now is caught between the Genesee River and the Erie Canal, making it a strange sort of peninsula, surrounded by a sea of rental houses and suburbs. If it wasn't for the flight path, the nights would be quiet and still, but the intermittent planes passing only a few hundred feet overhead make the frames of the buildings rumble and the ground mirror the low vibrations. Due to a scheduling oversight on my part, I leave and come into work under the same set of stars on one night and one morning a week, behind on sleep even before I'm able to clock out for the night. I thought it would bother me more, but it doesn't. The weather is cooling as the earth tilts away from the sun and Orion chases Scorpius from the sky, and the wind is cold again, and brings either days of clear blue sky or days of rain, meaning a mist in the evening often turns into a downpour in the morning. Despite the early hour, the commute is usually so easy, so benign, until the cover of rain, and the night obscures the right turn and points to the wrong one. The rain slapped at my car and the steady roll of a snarl as I raced down the road, hours before the sun would rise. I shivered in the driver's seat, more out of tiredness than chill. The familiar shapes of buildings passed to the left, and I waited for my turn, and it did not come. Certain I had simply yawned too long to notice it, I waited for the next. Minutes later, it still had not come, nor had the one after it, and, suddenly, the voice on the radio was not a companion, but a reminder that I was terribly alone with no other cars on the road so early in the morning. When the first farmhouse appeared, muddled by the downpour, my long-forgotten fear was realized. Forced awake, my mind raced backwards over the gentle telemetry that had brought me here. To my sinking horror, I found my mistake to be much worse than a simple wrong turn. In my hurry, not only had I mistaken one road for another, but I had crossed over the Genesee without acknowledging everything that had made me so afraid of rivers as a child. And here I was, miles since crossing her, and I had not kept home in mind. I wasn't sure if I even had a home to return to, shuffling from lease to lease over the last 3 years. The low fuel light had become an omen, and the fingers resting on the stalk to switch on high beams to scan for deer grew hesitant, even for a flash. The dark was alive again, and it was dangerous, hiding all sorts of untold mysteries whose eyes would pierce through the mist like beacons if I only dared to look. Mysteries that ate the chickens after dusk, only for the foxes and farm dogs to be blamed for the scattered blood and sprayed feathers come dawn. Sinking into the seat, I looked for the first house with a porch light to turn back from, waiting to draw back from the wrong side of the river. If you are familiar with the strange feeling that comes with driving alone, please take some time to rate and subscribe to Eyes on the Asphalt on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you liked what you heard, please share your experience on social media and consider becoming a patron on Patreon for exclusive stickers and t-shirts, as well as an exclusive Discord where you can communicate with me and other friends of the show. If you are listening to this with an empty passenger seat, remember to keep your eyes on the asphalt. Until next time, this is Red, signing off.